In this video, we're going to show you how to install the AC condenser on your Nissan Versa, located right behind the front grille. We're going to go ahead and remove our air intake tube here. We're going to use our trim tool and remove the button right here that's holding this in place. There's normally two here, but ours is missing one. If you have both, remove both. I'm going to lift up on this. I'm going to also remove the silencer box over here. Just gently pull up. And then the tube goes back to the air filter box. I'm going to wiggle that out. Let's go ahead and remove the forward portion of our air intake. I'm going to pull up on the box right here. Use our trim tool. We want to disconnect this back portion right here. Now I did grab a catch can or a bucket here to go ahead and catch any residual fluid that we're going to drain out of this reservoir when we pull it up. Right on the front side here, there's a plastic retainer tab that's flexible. You're going to push that back towards the engine. At the same time, pull up. That'll allow this to come up. Bring this on over to your catch can. You're going to disconnect this here. Sometimes it might be easier just to open up the cap. Drain out that fluid. Now that we have a reservoir removed and we have it drained out, that's going to reduce the risk of us spilling any fluid around the engine. Go ahead and set that aside. I'm going to remove the hose off of the radiator here. We're going to disconnect this hose here from the radiator. It's going to make it easier for us to pull up the cooling fan up and out. Now we did put a drain bucket underneath to catch any residual coolant that may be coming out of this here. Pinch that. I'm going to give this a little twist. Break that free. Make sure that coolant or the bucket is underneath. We're just going to let a little bit dribble out here. I want to go ahead and grab a securing strap. We're just going to tuck that up out of the way and anchor that someplace else to hold that hose up. Next, we want to go ahead and disconnect the electrical connector to the cooling fans on the driver's side of the fan. Electrical connector up top right here. You want to push in on this tab. Sometimes it can be stuck, so I like to use a pair of pliers here. Just be careful. You don't want to crack the plastic, so gently pinch and just wiggle that off. Next one is a gray connector down below. It's a large connector. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to push in on the top of this tab and pull up on the connector. We're going to use our trim tool to go ahead and pop this little plastic retainer off of that electrical strap here. Tuck that off to the side. On the top of our fans is going to be two 10mm bolts, one on the driver's side, one over on the passenger side right here. Let's go ahead and loosen and remove those. Now that we have those two out, go ahead and set them aside. We have a wiring harness right here that comes through and it's keeping us from pulling the fan out. And we're going to go ahead and remove the harness with this plastic retainer. And in the mirror you can see there's a little black tab in the center of that metal bracket, and there's a little arrow pointing to it. We're going to use a pick or a small pocket screwdriver to go ahead and push in on that, and then slide this whole harness retainer off of that bracket. Now this harness comes around to this back harness here. There's a retainer right here. We're going to use our trim tool to release this back harness here. All right, go ahead and pop that off and pull that aside. And while you're pulling that aside, you can grab that harness and pull that off. Now across the top of the radiator here, we have a plastic cover over the top of the support, the core support. So we're going to use our trim tool, and we want to remove these plastic retainer buttons. We'll do this across both sides, pop all these out. Once we have all these removed, go ahead and pull up on this cover and set it aside. On the upper radiator support, there's going to be two 12mm bolts here on the passenger side and two more on the driver's side. I'm going to go ahead and use our ratchet. We did spray these down with some rust penetrant. Now this bolt here is behind our washer reservoir. We just popped a little plastic button out of the washer reservoir there, and we'll just eliminate that nut just popped off there with a bolt. We can do the same on the driver's side. We have a 10mm bolt here for our headlight assembly. Go ahead, loosen and remove that. And once you get this one out, I'm going to repeat the process for the passenger side. We're going to remove our radiator cap. This is going to help the radiator drain once we pull that lower hose off the bottom. On our lower radiator hose, we have a clamp right here. Going to use our pliers, open that up and slide that clamp back. Once we have that back, you want to go ahead and grab that hose and give it a twist here to try and break it free. And if it doesn't want to break free, we can use a pair of large adjustable pliers. Break it free, and we're going to slowly twist that back. Now coolant is going to come gushing out of this here. We have a drain bucket. Make sure you're wearing safety glasses. Now you can control the drainage here by letting this go a little bit. When the majority of that coolant drained out, go ahead and disconnect that hose altogether. Gonna stand back for a few minutes and let that continue to drain out. Just to the left of the lower radiator hose, we have another hose here. We're gonna use our pliers, pinch that hose clamp and slide that back. And then there's one way over on the driver's side over here. We're gonna do the same for this one here. This hose clamp is in a rough shape. Now, if you're inspecting your clamps and they look rusty or they look like they're going to break, you definitely want to source some alternate clamps and make sure you install them on your installation. This one here is just rusted beyond use, so we're simply going to take that one off. Make sure you're wearing safety glasses when working underneath the vehicle. Now we're not going to pull these hoses off yet because for recycling purposes, we need to keep our oils and our antifreeze separated. So we're not going to pull these transmission cooler lines off yet. Just going to remove the clamps. Once the radiator is done draining, we'll go ahead and switch out our bucket to an oil bucket. There we go. We can use our hose pliers here. What we're going to do is basically just break those free. Just twist them. I'm not going to remove them. There we go. Now with the proper drain bucket underneath to catch this fluid here, let's go ahead and twist off this hose. Now if you happen to have a plug available for these here, you can go ahead and cap off that line. Let's go ahead and disconnect the one on the driver's side. Now at this point, we have our two hoses for the transmission disconnected and capped off. We have our lower radiator hose removed. Let's go back up top and we'll go ahead and work on pulling the radiator out. At this point here, our bracket is loose. It's still anchored in the center here, so we just have to pull this up and disconnect the radiator out of these rubber grommets. Pull it up, tilt that radiator. Now coolant is going to come out of that radiator. There's just some residual, so we do have some mats and a bucket underneath. Go ahead and pull that straight up and out. Bring it over to a bucket and you can go ahead and drain any residual coolant that might be in that radiator. Before disconnecting the AC condenser, you want to professionally go ahead and have the system evacuated. This is not something you want to be able to do in your driveway at home. This needs to be professionally done so that the chemicals inside the AC system can be properly evacuated and sealed. Now there's a tab on this side of our connector. You can push in with your finger and pull up on that connector. Ours is stuck. So we're going to use our pliers here to gently pinch that and wiggle this off. These bolts are 13 millimeter. We use our ratchet to go ahead, loosen and remove these. Now there is going to be a little bit of pressure still in the system after it has been professionally evacuated. So once you pop this off, it's going to pop and make a quick little hissing sound. Nothing to be concerned about. However, you do want to be wearing safety glasses as well as gloves. There's a rubber O-ring in here, helping with the sealing of this system. It doesn't want to pop out right now. Let's go down to our lower bolt down here. Our lower bolt is actually a 10 millimeter. The upper bolt is a 13, the lower is a 10 on this particular model. We're going to lift up on our core support on both sides. We're going to pull up on that AC condenser. And it's going to give us a little more wiggle room to work on removing these lines. And there it is, there's a hissing. I get the lower hose out. Go ahead and lift up our AC unit here. We're going to swap over our pressure switch here using a 15/16 socket and our ratchet. Let's go ahead and loosen that. Now, right where we removed our pressure switch is an O-ring. I want to go ahead and pop this out. You want to inspect it, make sure there's no tears, any defects in it, and ours looks really good. So we're going to set that aside. On our posts up top here, there are rubber grommets. Want to swap these over. You can use a pocket screwdriver or whatever you have available. Swap these over. Grab it off the other side. Flip it over. I'm going to use a pick and a pocket screwdriver. You're going to lift up on this little tab and pry up. And this should help you loosen that. Do the same for the other side. We're just going to spin this around and do the same here. Now, we had popped off our plastic mounting base with the rubber grommet in anticipation of swapping it over onto this here. This newer unit is updated. It simply needs the rubber grommet on the top here. Just twist it off like so and press this onto the new one. Do the same for the other side. You can simply discard the other plastic pieces there. Swap that and put it onto the other side. Going to do the same for the upper portion. Install the rubber bushing and do the same for the driver's side. Right down here we have the plug. That is where the pressure switch is going to go. So I'm going to lay this down and remove this bolt. Now, there is a brand new O-ring on this here. Remove it without damaging that. I'm going to just swap this over. Inspect that O-ring. Everything looks good. Let's go ahead and install this. Put that right onto the pressure switch. And let's thread that in. Good news, a ratchet. And pretty much you want to bottom that out. You don't have to crank on it super tight. You just want to make sure that that switch is seated out to that main block right there, and that O-ring will finish the sealing portion. On the ends right here, we have the plugs. Pop that out. I'm going to do the same on the other side. And let's go ahead and lower this in and install it. On the lower portion here, there is a rubber O-ring. I want to go ahead and inspect that, make sure that is in good condition, and ours is. So we're simply going to position our AC condenser. We can get this lower line fitted into it. Push that into place, install that bolt. Now I'm not going to tighten it, I'm just going to thread it in as far as I can by hand. Let's go ahead and get the upper one installed. Do the same thing, there's a rubber O-ring up top here. Ours is in really good condition. We could go ahead and bring our AC condenser up into position and almost get that put right into the rubber grommets at the base. Get it fitted in, and then go ahead and line up our upper line. Push that in. Work that into position. And let's go ahead and get that upper bolt installed. I'm going to thread it in as far as I can by hand. Now at this point here you can see that the condenser needs to get back into the core support. Simply lift up on that support, push that in, and let's do the same for the driver's side. Here we go. Our AC condenser is mounted on the top as well as down below. Same on the passenger side. Now we can go ahead and tighten down that bolt on the lower line. Once that bottoms out, you just want to give it a little bit more. You don't have to over tighten this here, but you do want to make sure that it's snug. Very, very important note, make sure that this block for this line is fully seated all the way around. If there is a gap somewhere, it is not seated. You'll have to adjust that. Make sure, you might have to remove the line and pop it back in. But we are fully seated, bolt tight, and our pressure switch is installed. You want to go ahead and just push that connector down, and you feel it click into place. Give it a little tug. Make sure it's locked on. I want to go ahead and snug the upper AC line bolt. Now in tightening this here, it is the same as below. Very, very critical. Make sure that the line housing right here is completely flush up against the AC condenser. If there is a gap or it's wedged, you need to undo that bolt, reseat this, and then reinstall. Once this bolt is snug or bottomed out, you want to go just a little bit more just to make sure that it is snug in place. And you're all set there. We want to go ahead and lower our radiator down into position. And there's key things you want to pay attention to. On both the left and right hand side, there's going to be these plastic posts as well as this one in the middle. These fit into the rubber grommets at the base. Let's go ahead and lower this down in a position. All right. Now at this point, the bottom is in position. We're going to lift up on the support a little bit, and we're going to tip these back and put the upper post into these upper grommets. Our radiator is now in position. Let's go ahead and secure the upper support. We're going to install our bolt here right by the washer reservoir and get the other bolt started here. Install our headlight bracket bolt here. We have these 3 started. We're going to do the same on the driver's side. Now that we have all 6 of these bolts started, we can go ahead and snug those down. Once that bottoms out, give it a little bit more. Pretty much you want to make these tight. Once that bottoms out, not even a full quarter turn before that's feeling pretty secure. This bolt here, we're just securing plastic to the bracket. You don't want to over tighten this. You can crack the headlight bracket. So once that's bottomed out, just a little bit more, not even a full quarter turn, we can re-secure our washer reservoir here. I want to get that base installed first. As you use your trim tool, because not a lot of room to get that in. Push that in and then get that center locked in. Install your lower radiator hose. Move your clamp down in a position. Now our clamps here, they're pretty rusted. Now's the time to replace them if you can. If you don't have them and your clamps are in good condition, it's fine to reuse those. We're going to install new clamps. Remove our plug and push this on. Now if you have clamps, just use your pliers and slide that back in a position. We're just going to tighten up our new clamps. Old piece of the clamp still on here. Install the upper shield here. Once we have this in place, we can install our plastic push pins. Go ahead and install your cap. Now when we lower our radiator fan down in a position, there's 2 tabs on the bottom that are going to go into the 2 tabs on our radiator. We want to make sure that those line up properly. Let's go ahead and lower this down. this point here, our fan is lower down into our radiator. Install our two 10mm screws to secure this in place. I'm not going to tighten this one down yet. Install the screw on the other side, on the driver's side here. And it's nice if you don't tighten down the other side, it gives you some adjustability to lift and lower the cooling fan to line that up properly. Now we can go ahead and snug these down. Just once that bottoms out, just a hair bit more. We don't want to crack or cause any damage to the plastic here. Do the same here. Once the screw is bottomed out, that's pretty much it. Pull that harness off that we had tucked away. We're going to install our lower connector first. Go ahead and line that up. Go ahead and push that down all the way. Give it a little wiggle, make sure it's secured in there properly. Line this one up here. Push that in. Go ahead and push that in, and you'll feel it lock into place. Install our upper radiator hose. Go ahead and adjust the clamp here and slide that over. Go ahead and line that up, release that. Install the hose on the radiator. Lower our expansion tank down inside. And when we lower this down, there's a tab on the bottom that fits into the cooling fan. I'm going to lower that down, and on the top side, there's two tabs here that lock into our radiator. So there's 3 points of securing this. Push it down into place. We want to go ahead and top off our tank here. So we're going to open this up. And on the side there is a min and a max. At this point here, the engine is cold. We're going to fill it up to the max using the proper coolant for the vehicle. Go ahead and fill this up. And put on the cap. Install our air intake components here. Install your two plastic clips on the front. Our original push pins were damaged, so we just had to source a couple new ones. Remove our radiator cap. I'm going to install our fill funnel here. Let's go ahead and add the coolant. As you're doing this here, you want to go ahead and double check underneath the vehicle. Check the hoses and clamps. Make sure there's no leaks. Now at this point, we're going to go ahead and start up the vehicle. We're going to let it run for a few minutes. We're going to put the heat on high. We want to go ahead and let that thermostat open up to circulate that coolant through the engine and make sure that the fluid is topped off. I'm going to turn our heat all the way on. Put the fan on high. I'm going to let the vehicle run for a little bit. As you can see, some of the bubbles are working their way through. The water pump is circulating the coolant through the engine a little bit. Once that thermostat opens up, it's going to continue to consume some of that water that we have added to this here. Now that we've run the vehicle for a little bit and the system has purged and burped up any air pockets, we now go ahead and remove our funnel system here. And install our radiator cap. At this point here, you can go ahead and take the vehicle for a road test. You do want to go ahead and bring the vehicle down to your local repair shop and have them recharge the AC system.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.